When I was 22, I moved to a new state for graduate school. My stepfather, who I see and refer to as my dad, decided that rather than renting an apartment, it would be better if he bought a house and I paid him the mortgage as rent, and he'd eventually work on the house and sell it for profit when I left. This was especially preferable because A, the apartments I had been looking at closer to the city actually had rents that were nearly the same or more as the mortgage on this two-bedroom house in a suburban neighborhood, and B, it should also be safer, as my dad was really nervous about me being a young woman living alone for the first time, at least until I found a roommate. So my dad was with me, moving in the little furniture that I had when the next-door neighbors stopped by to introduce themselves. They were an older couple, probably in their mid-60s, no kids, and very friendly. The husband mostly addressed my dad in the conversation and informed him that he and his wife had been very close with the man who lived in the house before me, frequently dog-sitting for him, and that they actually had a spare key to the place still because of that. He even joked, "So if she ever gets locked out of the house after a night out, I can help." I didn't think much of it, but it left a bad taste in my dad's mouth. He thought it was really weird that the man hadn't just offered to return the key immediately, rather than simply informing us that he had one and intended to keep it. Dad added a new item to his to-do list: change all the locks. It was the last thing he did before he left me there on my own. A few weeks pass, and I'm settling in nicely. I even made good friends at school with a guy, who would eventually go on to become my boyfriend and roommate. One day, as I'm out mowing the front lawn, the husband next door comes over to me after he pulls in the driveway. I stop and chat with him, and he asks if I'd like to come over and, quote, have a home-cooked meal for once, since I had joked that I was living on ramen noodles. I told him I didn't want to impose, but he insisted that his wife always made extra and it would be no trouble. I thanked him and agreed to come over for dinner that evening. It seemed really sweet, the idea of this older couple having me over for a meal. I knocked on their door at the time that he had given me. He opened it and invited me in. Immediately, he pours me a large glass of wine and asks me to follow him to the living room and to have a seat on one of the couches. I ask him where his wife is. I had assumed from his invitation that she would obviously be there, and he informs me, "Oh, she's visiting her sister down south this weekend." Red flag number 1. I wouldn't have come here, not in a million years, if I knew the woman wasn't home. I told him that I thought from his invite that she would be here. He said no, but that she had left him a ton of leftovers and he needed someone to share them with. So I'm not panicking at this point, but my guard's certainly up. I'm drinking the glass of wine that he's poured me very slowly, and he notices. "I figure a young girl like you, starting school in a new city, you're probably used to shooting the drinks back." Red flag number 2. Why is this man so concerned with my alcohol consumption? But aside from that, things seem fairly normal. He's sitting across from me on the opposite couch and telling me more about the city, places to go, places to avoid. It seems fine, and I'm actually learning some stuff and making some mental notes. Eventually, he puts the prepared lasagna in the oven, and I really do just want to get this dinner over with because I'm reaching my socialization cap for the day. He returns to the living room, this time with the entire bottle of wine, and sits down. Except this time he sits down right next to me on the same couch. He also refills my not yet empty glass to the brim. Now I'm super uncomfortable. He's sitting way too close. My body language shows it. I completely clam up, sit up bolt right, and don't touch my drink. He notices again, and then the conversation turns really weird. He starts asking me about my experience with drugs. I brush it off and tell him that I'm pretty straight-laced. He tells me he has some weed in the kitchen and was hoping I'd smoke some with him. I'm pretty flabbergasted at this point. Everything is becoming clear. This older man invited his young female neighbor over intentionally, on a night that his wife was out of town, and wanted to supply me with wine and weed, and what exactly? Is this seriously happening? So now I'm fiddling with my phone as he talks, texting the guy friend from school with brief updates outlining the situation. Neighbor gets sort of irritated. Says something like, "Sorry, I'm not entertaining enough for you. I'm sure you have lots of boyfriends already that you need to tend to." As if he's joking, but also with a weird edge. Okay, time to plant the seed for my exit. I say, "Oh, it's just a friend of mine having some car troubles. She might need a ride." He says, "That's unfortunate." And then he tells me, "You really need to learn to loosen up." And that's when he leans in and starts massaging my shoulders. So at this point my ears start ringing and I am in full-on fight or flight mode. I freeze for a second and weigh my options quickly. I think I can take him, honestly, if it came to that. He's old, even has a bit of a limp, and he seems to have been drinking since well before I got there. I'm small, but I have my bag next to me, and there's a folding knife in it, along with a can of pepper spray. Okay, I need to get out of there, but I know what I have available to me. I shoot up from the couch, bag in hand, and look back at him, trying to determine whether he's going to pursue. He doesn't seem to be set on that, he's just sitting there. Okay, good. I glance at my phone and say, "Yep, she definitely needs me. Sorry," and begin walking, almost running to the door. I drop my phone in my bag and get my hand around the can of pepper spray. He follows behind and mumbles something about, "At least let me walk you out." As my right hand touches the door handle, he reaches his arm out from behind me to hold it shut. At this point, I'm like, alright, I may have to hurt this man, and I'm gearing up to do it. My ears are ringing so fucking loudly. But he doesn't touch me. Instead, he just leans in a bit and says, "Remember, if you ever get into trouble, I have that spare key." Yeah, fucking noted, dude. I hightail it across his yard, get to my house, and pretty much collapse on my couch in a panic attack / crying session. The guy I had been texting was aware of some of the situation, but not the entirety of it. I'm alone, and despite my locks being safe now, I'm still scared. So I call him and awkwardly explain what just happened. He was incredibly kind and offered to drive over. He ended up hanging out with me too late into the night and offered to crash on my couch for the evening. I took him up on it. Needless to say, I never spoke to my neighbor again after that. If we saw each other outside, I made zero acknowledgement of him, and he never tried to get my attention again either. His wife even began behaving coldly toward me, never waving when she saw me. I always wonder if he told her something about it and what twisted narrative he might have given. I didn't tell my dad about the situation until a few weeks later because I was afraid that he'd drive up and beat the shit out of him, honestly. So yeah, that's the story about how my creepy old man neighbor attempted to take advantage of me and intimidate me. Things I learned. Dads have the best intuition, and I need to not let being nice ever take precedence over my own alarm bells. And creepy old neighbor, let's never meet again. This is something that was super traumatic for me, but it was never discussed again in my household. I was talking with my mom about it the other night, and she still didn't say much. I thought I would share my thoughts with everybody, just so I can make sense of it. When I was 13, I got a Dell desktop for school. The internet was fairly new for me back in 2003. AOL and MySpace, Yahoo Messenger, AOL chat rooms, 16 female Cali, anyone? AOL chat rooms were where I went. I was a shy, overweight kid back then, still shy to this day. But online I could be anyone. I could say anything. It was amazing. I discovered so many things when I got on the internet, but if I could be anyone, so could someone else. Thus how I met one 27-year-old man. One night I logged on. The AOL dial-up sound still makes me feel uneasy. I was sitting in my cold, dark kitchen. The computer was here so I could be monitored. It was just me and my mom, though, and she was always working, so no one ever really monitored me. Plus, she had no idea how to use a computer, so I got away with a lot. I was bored, so I hopped into an AOL chat room, lurked for a bit, and then 15 female here. I was really 13, but saying that I was 15 made me feel so much more mature. A private message was incoming. "Hey, my name is Rob. Where are you from?" And that's how it all started. I told him where I was from, that I was in high school, which wasn't a lie. My school did go from grade 7 to 12. "What about you?" I asked. 19, male, New York. Oh man, was it cool to be talking to an older guy, and boy was he cute. Honestly, I don't remember much. Maybe I blanked it out. Maybe my memory is just shot. I do remember emails back and forth, the occasional phone call. I remember finding out he was talking to another girl, and I wanted to break things off, but he begged and pleaded until I caved. Then the "let's meet." I was nervous. He had never asked for a picture. He never really asked for much from me at all. Just emails back and forth, a phone call a day. But somehow he made me feel safe, made me feel wanted and cared for. He drove from New York to West Virginia one day. My mom worked right beside my house, so he parked about a quarter-mile away and took the back alley to enter my home. My friend was with me when he showed up, but was scared when she saw him and ran out the back door. I maybe should have taken a hint from that, but I just stood on the back porch with my head down and was given a huge hug as he led me inside. Not 5 minutes after being there, sitting on the couch, did he move things further. Then further, even into my bedroom. I won't get into the details on what happened next. I assume you can guess. After that, with instructions to get into his car after I get off the school bus, we went on a date. I had no idea where he was staying. I lived extremely far into the country, an hour's drive from the closest hotel. The next day, I got ready for school, rode the bus for 45 minutes, and as soon as I hopped off in the school parking lot, I got directly into his car. No one noticed. No one said anything. We drive around, never go on an actual date like he promised. He just finds different places to park so that he can use me. I notice a photo of another young girl, 15 or 16, in the visor of his car. I question him. I believe when he tells me it's his cousin. I believe when I question why his hairline is receding so much. I believe him when he tells me that I can't see his driver's license because he left it in the hotel. I believed him when he said he loved me. I get dropped back off at school, super sad that he was going back home, with promises that he will call. Again, everything feels very fuzzy. I can't remember many emotions from this time. I do remember that a few days later my mom said that she found out that I skipped school with a man, that I was never to see him again, and that was that. I do remember sending an email. I do remember a late-night phone call. I do remember saying, "I wish I could just live with you." I remember him suggesting to come get me, and I remember agreeing. Days later, by the time he made the drive again, I was feeling iffy about leaving my mom. I mean, I loved her after all. I didn't think things through. I didn't put much thought into anything, really. I was just a kid. I packed a few clothes in a suitcase, forgot all the underwear. That is one of my sharpest memories. I had felt bad that he'd driven 8 hours to get me, so I left in the middle of the night. Got in the car, and his cousin was there. He got in the back seat with me and proceeded to have sex with me while his cousin drove. Then he got back in the front seat, and this happened a few times between my home and his. The drive took forever. I had nothing to drink. I was offered nothing when they got something. They stopped to nap at a rest stop, and I attempted to call my mom collect, which was disabled on our phone. I dug around for some change to get something to drink but couldn't afford anything in the convenience store, so I drank out of the truck stop sink. Hours later, we park a block away from his house while he runs to get something. I'm sitting in the back seat, waking up from a nap when around 8 or so men and women in black suits surround the car, screaming for us to get out with our hands up. My first thought was, shit, first 10 minutes in New York and I'm already being robbed. I'm terrified. I get out and a man pulls me over to the curb, while the other officers force his cousin onto the ground. All the while they're asking me my name and age and telling me to tell his cousin my age. I am put in the back of an unmarked car, driven to the NYPD. Past reporters, cameras, news trucks, snuck into the back of the station, where I see Rob in handcuffs for the last time. And for in love 14-year-old me, this is devastating. I'm taken into a room and questioned for hours, and then I'm taken to the hospital. Then a hotel where a nice woman brings me Taco Bell and stays with me as I fall asleep. The next day, 2 FBI officers escort me home on a plane, where I get off and am greeted by police officers, my mother, and a horde of news reporters. I later found out that when my mom reported me missing, the police didn't want to do much. They didn't even take the picture of me. She had had his license plate number. She remembers seeing his car parked by the road at that first meeting. She took note since it was an out-of-state car. Thanks to her for being vigilant. I do find this is the only reason I'm alive today. The police said they'd look into it, but that wasn't enough for my mom. She contacted a family friend who in turn contacted the governor of West Virginia, who in turn made the police look further into it. After they ran the license plate number and looked into the man and found out who he was, they issued an Amber Alert. Noting that I was in extreme danger, my cousin told my mom that he looked at Rob's rap sheet and that it was a mile long, but he wouldn't tell my mother what it was on for fear of scaring her. I think she put it together, though. I never went to court, I never went to any hearings, but I did fall into a horrible depression. My friends' parents wouldn't let them hang out with me. People spray-painted slut on my locker at school. I had no friends, but most of all, I thought a man was in prison for loving me. When I learned that he got a 10-year prison sentence, which he deserved every year of, I became deeply troubled. I was in and out of the mental hospital for self-harm for years, on a slew of depression medication. Psychiatrists never talked to me about anything. I had to process it all myself. My teenage years were better, though. I transferred schools, made best friends, graduated, but still in the back of my mind I felt that I was the reason a man lost 10 years of his life, until I was told that he was let out of prison. A couple of years after he was out, I contacted him on Facebook. At the time, I was around 24 or 25. He told me that if I ever contacted him again, he would kill both me and my mother, and that he still knows where I live. I had no idea what he planned to do with me. My mom still says that he probably wanted to sell me to a sex trafficker. I was told he had other girls my age that he was talking to. Some good things happened because of my kidnapping. Schools all over my state started internet safety education classes. Kids were taught safety, parents were taught how to keep kids safe. No other girls were taken by this man. So to the man who ruined so many years of my life, I'm 29 now. I am happy, healthy, and I have zero remorse that you are now listed as a level 3 sex offender and that you were in prison for so many years. This happened to me in 2015 when I was 19 years old. I was a sophomore in college, and the only notable relationship I had was with a guy that later left me for unknown reasons. While this was all starting, my dad offered to give his old friend a place to stay. He was in his 40s at the time, and his room ended up being the downstairs common area right next to my room. His daughter was a childhood friend of mine and my sister, so when she visited, we often spent a lot of time together. I made the now regrettable decision of taking on a design major, so most of my homework that semester had to be done in this common room. I often had many late nights, so we'd end up talking to each other. He spent most nights playing World of Warcraft after coming home from his shifts down in Atlantic City. When he wasn't playing, the two of us would watch movies and shows on Netflix or play video games together for all hours of the night. We shared a lot of interests like anime, cult horror movies, different video game franchises, and a fascination with witchcraft. We ended up being pretty close friends. I didn't have my license at the time, so he would often take me to school and work. That was more time that we had to get to know each other, and I ended up growing a bond with him. I considered him like an uncle. For the rest of the story, I'll be referring to him as my uncle. There were a few times where we did a lot of traveling together with his daughter, too. We'd go to the surrounding shopping malls in our county, and there was one day when we went to Smithville and looked at all the different shops. I genuinely had a great time. But then, something started to seem off. On my days off from school or work, we started to take trips during the week to different places. It started out with food shopping or me needing to buy supplies for my classes. Then he started mentioning about this place where he frequented to get incense and paraphernalia. The only problem was that on this particular day I had to babysit my youngest brother, who was 3 at the time. My uncle assured me that he could just tag along, so we ended up going. This shop was innocent enough, mostly selling Wiccan items and incense. It was interesting, and I was interested in a lot of the things that they were selling. I was just looking around. I tried to make sure my brother stayed by my side, and I held his hand or would occasionally pick him up in my arms when he was shy. Meanwhile, my uncle was chatting with the tenders. One of them ended up making the mistake of asking, "Is that your son?" I still get asked if my younger brothers are my kids all the time because of the big age gap between us. So I was of course quick to try to say, "No, he's my brother." My uncle, however, had a different way of handling it. He told them, "Yeah, isn't he cute?" I tensed up and was quick to really correct him now. The ladies apologized, but my uncle acted like I didn't say anything. They gave my brother a coloring book, and we soon left. I liked that shop, but because of that incident I never went back. I don't remember if I tried confronting him about it at the time, but it definitely was not the last time that he tried something like that. Now about that trip to Smithville. As fun as it was, going there for the first time, my uncle still tried keeping close to me in the shops, even with his daughter with us. He had a girlfriend that lived up north, and yet when people would talk to us, he acted like we were together. It made me uncomfortable, but what was I supposed to say? I thought that maybe I was digging too deeply into it, so I didn't say much, unless if it was to look at his daughter to see what her reaction was. She did seem quite bothered, to my relief, which validated my concerns. But here's where things came to a head. Around November of that year, my uncle invited me to come with him to this indie game convention that was in Atlantic City. It seemed like a harmless enough event, so on a day that I just so happened to be off, I decided to go. It was a simple enough convention with a lot of indie game developers showing off their demos on the convention floor in this casino. There were different vendors and shops, too. I sat down to play a demo that caught my interest. I was playing and getting a feel for the game, but the developer looked at me and my uncle and playfully commented to him, "This is a good game to play with your wife." I was awkwardly sitting there, mostly because any feminine epithet towards me made me feel extremely uncomfortable. I was dealing with dysphoria at the time. But not once did my uncle correct them while we were at this particular booth. He never once stopped to say, "No, wait, we're not married," or "I actually have a girlfriend already." He went along with it, in fact. He always did. Let me just remind you of this important detail. I was 19 years old, just barely over 5 foot and struggling to survive off my paychecks. My uncle was a full-grown, 44-year-old man. At this shop, I was looking around while my uncle met up with another guy that was looking around. I think he had kids or something. I don't remember how this was brought up, but he mentioned something about children. He might have asked something along the lines of, "Do you guys have kids?" referencing my uncle and I, but my soul was leaving my body out of complete embarrassment and discomfort at this point. Then my uncle responded to this stranger's asinine assumption and said, "No, but maybe one day." I snapped at that point. Of course I didn't start yelling, but I damn well should have. Instead, after the stranger left, I told him to knock it off, that I was so uncomfortable. I tried to get my point across. After all, who just says things like that to random strangers? And people just kept assuming that we were married, because he never even bothered to tell them the truth. He turns to me, and with no concept of reality of the situation whatsoever, he says, "What? You'd be a great mother." The convention was completely ruined for me after that, and I didn't want to be seen with him in there anymore. We ended up walking to the boardwalk afterward, but he was still close and personal, like we were dating, despite my verbal discomfort towards it. I just wanted to go home. I even told my parents what happened when we finally got back, but nothing ever came of it, considering that he was still living with us for months after the convention. But after that, I never went somewhere alone with him again. I know he wouldn't have actually done anything to harm me, but it was the implication that when we were out together alone, he was telling people we were married, let alone considering having children. It wasn't even like I could drive away because I didn't have a license, and no one at home took me seriously. He eventually got kicked out over an unrelated incident. His daughter doesn't talk to him anymore. There are plenty of other stories with him, but for the sake of his and others' anonymity, and keeping this from getting any longer than it already is, I'll just leave it there. What triggered all these memories again was when he tried to reach out to me on Facebook a couple of months ago. "How's the family doing?" Like nothing ever happened. I still can't even watch some of the movies that I enjoyed without thinking of what he did. So, dear uncle that lied to strangers about me being your wife, let's never meet again. A little background. I grew up into my teens in a big city. Because of abuse, I was hypersexualized but refrained out of fear. If it matters, I'm a white male. While in junior high, I had few friends, but was not shy or reclusive, just an average kid. While outside on lunch break, I was walking by the monkey bars. A couple of girls were sitting on the chin-up bars, off to the side. As I passed, one of the girls started talking to me. Normal questions. Who are you? What grade? How old are you? Etc. One of the girls made to spin down, or slipped. Anyway, she was hanging upside down by one knee. She locked her other leg in a similar position and turned loose with her hands. Her shirt slid down right over her head. She was fully exposed since her bra didn't fit right. Everyone was laughing and looking, but no one was helping, and no one noticed the tissue that I could plainly see. I grabbed her shirt and pulled it up to cover her and helped her get down. Then I walked with her into the building. I figured, good deed done. Not quite. After school, she was waiting for me. She gave me a hug and then kissed me on the mouth. I pulled back because I don't know this person and I really don't want to get involved. I guess she thought I was offended, and she said, "What's wrong? Haven't you ever been kissed by a black girl?" I said, "No, but that's not the problem." She said, "Well, then what is the problem?" I truthfully told her that I didn't remember her name and I didn't even know her. She laughed and said, "It's Letitia." We said goodbye, and I caught the bus. The following Monday, Letitia's waiting for me at lunch. She tells me that she never did thank me for, quote, saving her, I told her not to worry about it, that it was cool. We walked around the soccer field, and then she stops me with her hand and she says, "My mom wants to meet you." What the fuck, right? I ask her why, and she tells me that she told her mom what happened and now her mom wants to meet me. She goes on to say she's picking me up so you can meet her then. We go back to our classes. I was never academically inclined, so now the damn day will just not move along. School ends, and after dragging my ass, I meet Letitia. We walk to the parking lot, and she gets all happy and says, "There's Mom." Yeah. We walk over, and her mom gets out of the car and gives me a huge hug. I'm internally losing my shit. She says how good it is to meet me and how nice I was to have been there for her daughter, and then she says, "You must come home for dinner." What are you talking about? I start making excuses about how my parents don't like me out on school nights, and she says, "Don't worry, it's all taken care of. I already called your mom. Dinner's tomorrow night at 6. They get in their car, and I get on the bus. I asked my mom why she would possibly say yes, and she replied that it would do me some good to meet other people, and girls. I had visions of telling her, "Oh, I've met her all right, and I've seen some things too. We even tongue wrestled." But I didn't. The next day just sucks. It takes forever, and at the same time it jerks forward at warp speed. Lunch break truly sucked. Letitia had told everyone that I was going to her house for dinner. Oh, and, quote, "to meet my dad." Great jumping Judas. I was like, what the fuck? I walk back to the building and spend the rest of the school day planning my escape while answering questions about dinner. The day ends without me having a single plan. She walks me to the bus since her mom isn't there yet, and then she kisses me. Even the fucking bus driver watched this happen. I get home, say not one word to anyone, and go to my room. My mother pops her head in and tells me to change for, quote, "my date," and goes back to hell where she came from. She drives me over and says that they'll bring me home. Oh no, you come get me. I don't know these people. I don't know why I'm going, why I was invited or anything, so Mom, you can come get me or I'm not going. She agrees and tells Letitia's mother that she will pick me up. They agree on a time and my mom leaves. I meet her 3 brothers, her 2 sisters, a cousin, and her grandmother. Everyone was cool. Well, one brother kept giving me the stink eye, but there's nothing I can do about that, so I ignore it. I thought maybe, just maybe, I could hang out with the 3 brothers, even stink eye, but that didn't happen. I ended up sitting next to Grandma, which was cool because Letitia's hovering. After about 15 minutes of nothing conversation, her dad comes home. This man is huge. He steps up to me as I stand, thinking about running, smothers my hand in his, and says, "So you're the boy who saw and rescued my daughter's titties." I fucking died. I stood there and thought I was gonna pass out. He asked me a couple of questions that I just nodded or shook my head to. My mind was screaming at me to talk, but I just couldn't. He says, "Take a seat." I did. He spoke for a while, telling me that interracial relationships were difficult at best. I could feel my neck twisting round to look at Letitia while he said that. "At the most, you can expect a little hostility," he said. She walks over and sits above me on the arm of the couch. I'm looking at her dad and then her, over and over. She reaches out and takes my fucking hand. Finally, I find my words and say, "What did you tell them?" She laughed and said, "Well, just that we're girlfriend and boyfriend. I didn't mention the other thing we did." Oh, hell no. I'm thinking, bitch, you kissed me. Do you think she whispered this? Not a damn chance. Her dad stops talking and just looks at us. Her grandmother, having sat right there the whole time, turns and adjusts her seat on the couch so she too can look at us. I'm turning red, embarrassed, yes, but I'm getting pissed. Her dad says, "What thing?" I told him, "Oh, she kissed me." It came out as an accusation. He looked at me and then looked at her. Now this stupid ass, this crazy ass tissue-wearing fool is gonna get it, I'm thinking. He takes a deep, slow breath and says, "Well, maybe you two will make it." Fucking make what? When the two of you are old enough, and if you still want to, I'll give you my blessing. I'm pissed. Blessing for what? I say. He says, "You will marry my daughter." I'm stunned. I snap out of it when she starts sliding down the arm like she's gonna land on me. I popped up and bam, out the door. Fuck being picked up. I'm running home. I get home to an empty house. I go to my room and lay on the bed. The phone rings. I go into the kitchen and answer it. It's my neighbor. He asks if I'm okay, and I say that I am. He tells me that my mom is out driving the streets looking for me. She got a call that I had left in a rush and everyone was worried. I said I was fine and hung up. I turned on the lamp in the living room to show that someone was home and went to bed. The phone rings again. I return to the kitchen and answer. "You will marry my daughter." It was her dad. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing the phone games again. Fuck this guy. "Sir," I said, "I wouldn't marry your daughter for all the tea in China." He says, "But you will marry her." I said, "Look, I don't know what she's told you. I don't know if she's crazy or if you are, but I am not, I repeat, not marrying her or anyone else. I helped her, and she kissed me. I didn't even know her fucking name. We are not dating. We have never dated, and we never will." He got quiet for a bit, and then he said, "Is what you just said true?" I said, "Every damn word." He tells me to watch out for his sons until he can come collect them. He then hangs up. The brothers announce themselves with pounding at the door. Oh, I think it's the whole family. They're all nuts. I start gearing up with multiple sweaters and 2 pairs of blue jeans. I get my bat ready and walk into the living room. I look out the bay window and they're still there. I look at my dad's gun rack, but I don't grab one, because I know they're loaded. I do mentally select the weapon I will use if everything goes left. The banging has stopped, and I look out the window again. The neighbor is talking to the brothers. While I watch, first my mom pulls into the drive, and then their father pulls up. My mom goes and talks to them. I can picture her telling them to all come in. After a minute or two, she comes in. "Are you okay?" "Mom, was this some kind of joke? Some kind of prank? Please say yes." She walks over and hugs me and says, "No. Son, you did a good thing at school. Don't let this stop you from doing the right thing. I'm so sorry. I had no idea." I just went to my room where I sat there. I don't even remember what I was thinking. To this day, almost 40 years later, I just shake my head when this memory returns. So Letitia and her dad and her brothers, let's never meet again. I was about 13 when my family went on our annual trip to Poland to visit family. My mother and father both come from a small rural village about 2 to 3 hours away from Warsaw. It's an idyllic little place that is surrounded by lush forest and wheat fields. Life is different there. Everyone is very carefree and relaxed. Being the small place that it is, everyone knows everyone, since everybody basically lives on the same street. I had made a bit of a reputation for myself there, being known as the American girl who visits in the summers, so whenever we would arrive, the whole village would know. I loved the attention. All the kids wanted to play, and adults doted on me. One of the townspeople I saw most frequently was Tomek. Tomek was a funny guy in his upper 20s who would work in the village deli store. He would always give me extra meat any time my grandparents would send me out to pick up food or offer to show me the inside of the kitchen. I never took him up on that offer. The idea of seeing how my meat was made was too much for my 13-year-old mind. Though I didn't know it at the time, Tomek had the reputation of being the town lunatic. He wasn't a stranger to the police force nor the villagers, as he was a bit of a petty thief. My grandparents told me when I got older that my grandfather had not once but twice caught him trying the doors of his shed and then excusing himself when he was caught, as drunk and unsure of where he was. Despite this, I never had a personal reason to fear or avoid him. The village had a tradition called Gra Odwaji, which translates to the Game of Courage, that would fall in between the dates of our visits. On this day, the village children would be set into teams and then given items to find that were hidden around the woods or the village parameters. The event lasted all day, and the group that had the most found items would win a prize. The courage part of the game would be trying to attain the golden item, which would be in the woods and guarded by a few adults armed with water sprayer guns. The only way to get the golden item was to avoid being sprayed with water. If all members of a team were hit, then the team would lose the chance to attain it. My team consisted of my 4 friends, Ava, Arek, Bartek, and Powell. Our strategy was to get as many of the items around town and then try our luck at the golden object when it got darker in order to be harder to spot. We got a lot of the items throughout the day and worked up a good sweat after racing against the other children. Around 7 p.m. we had attained 12 items, and we were ready to try our luck at the golden item. We had heard from the other children that the adults were being relentless, guarding the object with ferocity. The wooded area that was the destination as the golden item area was behind Eric's house, therefore he took the lead in devising the plan. Our plan was that we were going to split up into 2 teams. Eric, Ava, and Bartek were meant to grab the adults' attention and drive them away as far as possible, while Powell and I would sneak in and grab the item. Feeling confident, we headed into the forest as the sun was slipping from the sky. We followed the dirt path for about 5 minutes and then stepped off of it, following Arek as he navigated through the shrubbery with ease. He stopped us just as we reached a thick clump of bushes. Putting a finger to his lips, he motioned for us to look through the gaps in the shrubbery to see the adults. It was dark now, so it was hard to see who was actually guarding the item, but we could make out 4 shapes huddled together, chatting softly. Without hesitation, we moved into our plan of action. Our 3 friends navigated around and disappeared from our sight, only for us to hear their laughs and voices of adults yelling to get them. Powell and I watched the adults race after our friends, all abandoning the area they had stood around. I remember glancing around and getting ready to jump out of the bushes when I felt Powell's arm on my shoulder and saw him make a shushing sound. "They might not all be gone. Wait a bit," he urged. We sat quietly, listening intently for any sounds. Then it happened. The slightest sound of something moving on the other side of the clearing. We couldn't make out who or what it was, so we stayed quiet, peering through the gaps of the shrubbery. Powell saw it first. He pointed out what looked like a dark figure crouching behind a tree closest to the clearing. We watched as the figure moved tree to tree, never stepping out from behind, just simply observing. Just as I was about to suggest that one of us should cause a distraction, we hear a yelp, and turn to see another team approaching, clearly happy that there seemed to be no one around where the golden item should be. We watched as this small group of 2 raced around the clearing but didn't pick anything up. I kept waiting for the adult to step out and spray the kids, but the figure remained crouched, half visible behind the trees. One of the girls approached the area the adult was in, but she was busy looking up at the tree, musing to her partner that maybe the object was put on a branch. We watched as she began pulling herself up the lowest branch, and I remember the way my stomach dropped when all of a sudden we saw the adult shoot out behind the tree, grab her leg, and start pulling her into the darkness of the forest. Her partner ran off screaming, leaving me and Powell unsure of what to do. We watched, frozen with horror, as the adult began covering the girl's mouth in some attempt to silence her. Before either one of us could do anything, Tomek came running up the path and threw himself onto the man. Powell shot out to help Tomek while I ran back to call for help. When I reached the backyard that was the destination spot for the end of the game, I was screaming uncontrollably in a mix of words that took me a few attempts to get out that help was needed very badly. A large group of the men raced toward the forest while I hid in my mother's arms, waiting to see everybody arrive back safely. My friends Eric, Ava, and Bartek approached me cautiously and asked me what happened and why Powell and I hadn't come back. It had turned out that after Ava, Bartek, and Eric had distracted the adults and drove them away, the adults had decided to end the time to get the golden item. They had assumed that everyone had had a chance to try to get it and didn't want the kids wandering the forest after dark. One of the adults had already pocketed the item when they chased our group back toward the main backyard. My team had assumed that we would see that there was nothing there, and in return as well, which is why they didn't come looking for us. As I retold what happened, everyone in the backyard listened to me with wide eyes. About 10 minutes passed and we saw the group of men coming back, Powell walking aside his father and the girl who had been attacked in the arms of her assumed father. As they all approached, I asked Powell what had happened. As the parents gathered and talked in hushed tones, Powell described to us how Tomek had beat the guy bloody, but let him escape when he turned away, surprised by the men that had arrived to help. He mentioned that a few men were still out scouting the forest land for the guy. I then asked the remainder of my friends why help was not sent earlier by the girl's partner that had run away screaming. Everyone had looked at me with blank faces, and the sudden realization hit me hard. The next events become a blur. It's a mix of me racing to my parents with my friends and asking about the girl, a frenzy of people calling out her name and begging her to come out, a whirlwind of everyone rushing to get their kids inside, and a mayhem, adults swarming together to go search the woods again and call the police. It's been 8 years, and she hasn't been found. Tomek was one of the main suspects, believed to be part of a two-man kidnapping operation, but backed out when he saw that too much attention had been brought to the event. I'm not sure whatever happened to him, but I can't help but feel guilty that I didn't do anything to help either of those girls. I saw the girl run away. Powell and I were the last to see her. Sometimes when I see a child with braided hair, I get thrown back to that night, and I can still see her braids swirling around her as her figure disappeared from sight. Her name was Dorota, and I really hope she's alive. This past Friday, I fell asleep around 8 p.m. after work. When I woke up around 9, I decided it was too late to go out, so I made a plan to run to the gym down the street instead for a late-night workout. The small all-men's gym is just about a mile down the road. It was empty and dark inside, but the owner had given me the door code to get in. However, for whatever reason, the code wasn't working, and I couldn't get into the gym. I still wanted to get a workout in, so I figured I'd just extend my run and head up to the local middle school playground and do some pull-ups on the monkey bars instead. I figured it was better than no workout at all. I got to the block that the school was on and began walking down toward the playground. On the way, I passed two young girls walking the opposite direction. I would guess that they were about 11 or 12. They were silent and looked at me nervously as we passed, understandably so, as I'm a reasonably large man standing at 6'4", and it was nearly 10 p.m. at night on an empty street. I live in a little suburban town of about 12,000 people with little crime. It is a dry town and mostly larger residential homes. The town is only 2 miles across and has a very safe family feel. Most of the residents are upper-class families here to take advantage of the great school system. Despite the reputation of safety the town has, I thought it was much too late and dark out for these two young girls to be wandering the streets alone, as creeps can show up anywhere, anytime, something I would soon enough witness to be true. I hope they're heading home, I thought to myself. I then got to the playground attached to the middle school. The playground is on the corner of the block, with an alley leading to a parking lot behind the school, separating the playground from the local high-speed line going into the nearby city, about 10 miles away. The high-speed line is built underground with an open top and high walls topped off with a chain-link fence to keep pedestrians from falling in. There's a bridge to cross the tracks below, and then another street on the other side of the tracks from the school, running parallel to the rails, with one way going into the downtown business district and the other way going into a residential neighborhood. The young girls turn onto the street going toward the neighborhood away from downtown. I did one set of pull-ups on the monkey bars and was resting when I noticed a white pickup truck with the headlights cut and a raised cab with blacked-out windows covering the bed of the pickup truck, moving slowly past the middle school in the same direction the girls were going moments before. I found this very suspicious, and even more so once the truck stopped directly in front of the playground, almost as though the driver and passenger was checking it out. I stared at the truck, wondering what was going on, when I then noticed that there was a man walking about 20 feet behind the truck in the same direction. As he passed the stopped truck, the window of the truck rolled down, and I could see that there were two men inside. I clearly saw the man walking look over and made a keep going forward hand signal to the driver and passenger, which followed his directions and started moving again, creeping slowly along with the headlights cut just as they were before. I watched as they crossed the tracks and saw the man on foot go right on the parallel road along the tracks toward downtown, while the truck went left on the same street toward the residential neighborhood, in the same direction the young girls had gone less than 3 minutes prior. What the fuck did I just witness? I thought. I tried to make sense of what I had seen. To me, it seemed that the truck and man on foot were following the young girls, stopped at the playground to see if that's where they'd gone, and kept going when all they saw was me doing pull-ups. I felt sick to my stomach. I tried to think of what else these men could have been up to. Looking for a lost dog? No. They weren't calling out, and they were driving much too slowly. Making a drug deal? I mean, maybe, but what kind of drug deal goes down at a fairly well-lit school? Also, the man on foot signaling the truck forward and then going opposite ways down the next cross street didn't make sense for a drug deal. In my head, I thought at best what I saw was some kind of drug deal that was just weird. At worst, it was predators stalking two young girls in hopes of abducting them. I decided to follow the man on foot to find out. I followed him as he walked along the wall separating the sidewalk from the tracks below. On the other side of the street was a church and some office buildings. He was walking slowly and texting someone on his phone. I turned around and saw that the truck had stopped again about 2 blocks up the road in the opposite direction. The man on foot then completely stopped as I approached him. I couldn't be sure as to whether he realized that I was following him, so I approached him in the most casual way possible. He looked to be in his early 30s, stood about 5'10" with a slouch, and had curly hair with a noticeable scar going down the side of his head through his hair. From the moment I began speaking to this man, I could tell he was very nervous. The way he acted and talked made me even more suspicious up until the conclusion of our conversation. Admittedly, my adrenaline was going, so I don't remember the conversation word for word, but this is about how it went. I said, "Hey man, what's up? What are you doing?" The creep said, "Not much, just hanging out." I said, "Just hanging out, huh? Where are you going?" Just on a walk." "Dude, I saw you signal to that sketchy truck back by the playground. That was kinda weird. What's up with that?" Nothing at all. I just waved to them as I walked by." "Yeah, you didn't just wave to them. I saw you make a hand signal for them to keep going." I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know them." "I'm not stupid. I clearly saw you signal to them. I know that you know them. Just tell me what you're really doing out here, because that was really suspicious. The creep said, I'm not up to anything. Walk and talk with me about it. He nervously started walking away. I put my hand on his shoulder to stop him. No, stop and tell me what you're up to right now. You're acting very suspicious, and it's making me nervous, and I know you're up to something. So just tell me the truth. I don't care if you're buying drugs, I do them myself. Now, I only casually smoke weed, but I was trying to get him to open up. In a really nervous voice, the creep goes, I'm not up to anything, man, I swear. I'm a good Christian man, I swear. And he points to the church behind me across the street. Now I'm pissed. I didn't ask you what your religion was or whether you're a good person. I asked you what the fuck you and that sketchy truck are up to. Now do you want to tell me, or should I call the police and have them come and ask you? You can call the police, man, I'm not up to anything. Leave me alone, please, man, I'm scared. The man then turned to start walking away again, faster this time. I admit that I was quite angry at this point, as I knew I was clearly being lied to, and this guy was definitely up to no good. I push him, not very hard, with one arm to get him to stop. The dude loses his balance and almost falls over, but then immediately starts sprinting away from me down the street, turns the corner, and then continues to sprint into the downtown business district, passing right by the few other pedestrians on the street. There was no reason for me to chase him, so I lost sight of him as he ran away. I looked back, and the truck down the road that was stopped at the beginning of the confrontation was gone. I then take out my cell phone and call the non-emergency police line to report everything I'd seen. The police thank me and send a patrol car to the area by the middle school. When I told my girlfriend about what happened, she was upset with me for following and confronting the man. However, after what I saw, I'm still convinced that what I witnessed was 3 men stalking young girls with the intent to do them harm. I can't come up with another explanation as to what they could have possibly been doing. Seeing how nervous the man was talking to me, paired with how he lied and then took off running, only further convinced me of what I saw. I followed my gut instinct and took action, and I would do it all over again. However, I probably would have called the police before confronting the man myself if I could redo the whole thing. My girlfriend's concern was for my safety, although I was much bigger than the man and made sure that he was at least an arm's length from me at all times. He could have been armed, so I do understand her concern. At the very least, I hope that I thwarted a possible crime. As for the creep that ran away from me, let's not meet again.